Well, hi everyone. I see some familiar faces, some not familiar faces. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've never done a Zoom call with this many people, so it's great to see so many of your faces and names. And whether you're from Restore or Love146 or already part of our Dressember community, wanted to just say welcome, and we're really grateful and excited to spend the next hour with you. If we haven't met, I am Marissa. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Dressember. And if you are new to our community, Dressember is best known for our Style Challenge in the month of December, where men and women from around the world wear dresses and ties to raise awareness and funds for programs fighting human trafficking. So we just wrapped up our sixth campaign, and we have now raised over $10 million for prevention, rescue, and aftercare programs for survivors and those at risk of being trafficked. And as many of you probably know, we launched a COVID campaign probably about a month ago now, 4 or 5 weeks ago, as we were learning very quickly with you all from our programmatic partners how this is affecting survivors and victims of trafficking. And in full transparency, we have been learning along with you every step of the way. This is new territory for all of us, learning how it's affecting a population that we care so deeply about, what we can do about it. So again, yeah, just learning along with you guys. And I'm so excited because we have a few amazing speakers that are part of they're Dressember partners that are part of our COVID relief fund. Their organizations are going to be receiving support for their programs that have been impacted by COVID. So we have with us Amanda, who is the executive director of Restore, an amazing organization, anti-trafficking organization that works with survivors in New York City. We also have Rob, who is the CEO and founder of Love146. So they focus on ending child exploitation and providing survivor care. And they have programs in the US, the UK, the Philippines, and even Africa. And then a lot of you probably might recognize, we have Blythe Hill here, who is the CEO and founder of Dressember. And she's going to really talk to you guys about our response, Dressember's response to COVID, the journey that we've been on since learning kind of our role in all of this and supporting our partners that have been deeply affected by the current crisis. We are going to be doing a Q&A at the end a little bit later, so save your questions. If you have questions when the speakers are talking, go ahead and put them in the chat box here on the right. You can type them where it says type your message here. If it's not showing a chat box, it's because you have to click on the bottom toolbar where it says chat. You can send them to everyone, that's fine. If you want it to be anonymous, you can send them to Tori here, and then we'll answer those a little bit later. So with that, Blythe, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Marissa. Hi, everyone. It's great to get to see so many of your faces, and I'm really excited to give you guys the chance to hear from Amanda and Rob. And before we kind of kick it over to them, just want to give you a little bit of background on why Dressember is seeking to provide this funding, this crisis response funding during COVID-19. So as Marissa kind of mentioned, several weeks ago when all this started happening, it became very quickly apparent to us that anytime there's a crisis, it of course, I mean, this is affecting all of us in different ways. Some of us are, working at home. Some of us are recently unemployed. Others are on the front lines in grocery stores or service industry positions, or in medical care, healthcare positions. And so we are all here in a developed country in the US very affected. And so beyond that, there are people around the world who, even before a crisis, were living in extreme vulnerability. And so when you add a crisis onto a pre-existing vulnerability, it's exponentially heightens the vulnerability that a person has to entering trafficking or re-entering trafficking or being exploited. And Dressember exists to advocate for those people, the people who are most at risk for exploitation. And the way that we do this is through empowering and equipping ordinary people like all of you, like me. We are always looking for fun and easy ways to equip people to engage in the fight to end human trafficking and to advocate for the dignity of all people. So we absolutely did not want to sit out during a crisis when the people that we fight for year after year are facing this sort of super crisis. And so this is the time of year when we normally have our 5K events. We typically host a 5K here in Los Angeles, and then the last couple years, and especially this year, we've been encouraging people to host independently organized 5K events to benefit Dressember. We kind of had to reel that in when all of the stay-at-home and social distancing orders started rolling out. But now we are offering this virtual 5K as a way to engage in fundraising right now and in raising awareness for the super crisis that survivors and those at risk are facing. So historically, most of our funding comes in December during our annual campaign. We don't get a ton of funding in this, sort of off season for us, but with the 5K and with this specific crisis that we're trying to address, we're hoping that we can sort of create a groundswell and provide some vital resources towards survivors in crisis. So we've chosen to partner with two organizations, Restore NYC and Love146. Restore NYC, no surprise, is based in NYC, and we chose them because New York City is sort of the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis in the US. We'll have to get, I don't have today's numbers on where the number of cases stands in New York City, but I know that the surge there surpasses any other city in the US. And we've partnered with Restore NYC for a couple years now, supporting survivors transitioning into employment and comprehensive wraparound support. And a lot of those individuals are in service industry jobs. So a lot of them are working in restaurants and cafes, and they have been unemployed through this crisis and faced just, again, that sort of layered complex crisis on top of the things that you and I face without the same safety net that you and I, most of us, have. And then Love146, we have partnered with them as well for a couple years, and they do a lot of great work here in the US and internationally. But with this specific project, we're going to be partnering with them, the work that they're doing in the Philippines. We've talked a little bit on our channels about the surge in cyber sex trafficking and the risk that children in particular face during a time like this. And so that is something that we have been very passionate about and have been wanting to do something about, and especially at a time like this, find vitally important. So I'll kind of wrap it up there. Marissa, would you like to introduce our guests?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Blythe, for that overview. And now we're going to hear from Amanda, who is, again, the Executive Director from Restore NYC.
Thanks, Marissa. Thank you, Blythe, and the Dressember team for choosing to support and really honor the survivors of trafficking that we serve at Restore, and on behalf of Love146. It's a delight to be here with you all this evening. So Restore's mission is to end sex trafficking in New York and to restore the well-being and independence of immigrant survivors of sex trafficking. We just celebrated a decade of work in New York City, and Dressember has been a faithful supporter of our mission. As Blythe shared, their focus, their emphasis has been on our economic empowerment program. And as we are faced with the current pandemic and the economic crisis, at Restore, we've talked about the real unique challenge that survivors of trafficking are facing. We oftentimes talk about the problem of trafficking being a public health crisis and reflecting an economic crisis. And so the intersection of these two things within our society, within our culture, here in the US and around the world, is doubly, triply challenging for the people that we serve who are already on the margins in this intersection of a public health and economic crisis. Blythe, you had mentioned what do the stats look like. As of just an hour ago, I heard in New York City, we've now had over 11,000 deaths. To put that into perspective, on 9/11, there was just around 3,000 deaths in New York City. My husband and I are here alongside many of our colleagues at Restore. We're based in Manhattan. I'm 2 blocks from the Comfort ship. And yeah, even a week ago here in New York City, I was hearing sirens every 15 minutes of ambulances. So it's been quite surreal for us here. And our team at Restore just can't help but take action at this time because the needs are so great. Blythe had mentioned that many survivors have lost employment. And just a bit on our background at Restore and our economic empowerment program, we launched job services 4 years ago at Restore. And this was in response to survivors saying, I need work. I need help finding a job. We serve immigrant survivors of trafficking. And so the model that works best for this community is a workers-owned cooperative. And many of you likely are familiar with that business model. So we helped to found, to incubate that model about 4 years ago. We now have over 60 members. Just about 150 women have gone through our economic empowerment program, and we partner with over 30 businesses in New York City to employ survivors of trafficking. But within the first 4 days, so we built up this economic empowerment program for 4 years. Within the first 4 days of the shutdown in New York City, 80% of women lost their jobs, 80%. And all but one of our business partners had to close their doors. I mean, we just never could have imagined something like this could happen. And a lot of the women that we serve found themselves in this familiar place. Oftentimes we talk about this idea of being re-traumatized or re-triggered. Survivors of trafficking are often promised a job. They are told, come and work for me, you'll make a certain level of income. And then, as was the case this pandemic and the economic crisis, this position is pulled away. And there's no control that she may have. And this is devastating. This idea of now being in isolation, again, is reminding survivors of what they may have experienced when they were trafficked. And so in addition to the public health crisis, the economic crisis that women are faced with, the psychological trauma has been significant for the women that we worked with. We reached out right away. In just the first 3 weeks, we had over 800 touch points with our approximate 200 survivors that we work with. We asked through a text survey, what do you need during this time? So I'll read some of the statements of the responses. One woman said to us, I'm afraid of going out. I've lost my job. I'm just worried about paying rent and getting food. Another woman said food. We have no job, but I have 3 children that I have to support. Another woman said, I need to maintain constant communication with Restore. This is of utmost importance to me, and I need help buying food. We saw this theme of food, and I think from a trauma perspective, we understand that in times of crisis, like what we're facing now, basic needs are great fear for individuals. How will I survive day to day? And we learned through those first 3 weeks, survivors were saying that health and employment were their top 2 safety concerns. In the past, and we've been asking about safety, we have questions that we gather every 3 months. In the past, top safety concerns were for fear of traffickers or fear of someone finding them. It was not for health or employment reasons. But now, of course, this is escalated. And so many people are wondering, what are we doing at Restore in response? So even that first weekend after the shutdown here in New York City, which was about a month ago, we knew that we needed to respond quickly, and that the number one request would be cash, would be finances for survivors who had lost their jobs. Many immigrants do not qualify for traditional government relief. And many of the women that we work with, as is the case for so many nonprofit agencies who have economic empowerment programs, many women are living paycheck to paycheck, week to week. So this idea that I don't have work now, I'm not making any earnings, is a real threat. And one of my colleagues asked me, okay, if we put this fund together, how much do you think that we could raise in the next month? Because we wanted to have a sense for, of the 200 women we're helping, 80% have lost their job. What type of impact can we have? What's the expectation? What do we think that we can promise? And, that weekend I said, I think in a month we can bring in maybe $5,000, $10,000. It shows you kind of how low my personal expectation was at the time, because I saw so many people losing their jobs. I was concerned at the time for our community even being able to help. But even within the first 2 weeks, Restore brought in over $50,000 from community members here in New York City. And right away, within those first 2 weeks, we were able to help 38 women. And we allocated those funds to the 38 women who had 3 primary vulnerabilities. So Blythe had talked about vulnerabilities for people being trafficked. We focused on single moms. We focused on women who had not yet accessed immigration relief. So we knew for certain that she wouldn't be able to get government benefits. And then thirdly, a lot of women were telling us at Restore, I'm considering going back to prostitution, or I'm just going to go back to the life, or go back onto the streets. And when we heard that, we knew, okay, this cannot take place. These are especially the women that we want to focus on this early funding for. So yeah, that $50,000 was helping those 38 women for about a month. And just for perspective, average earnings for a week for a woman that we work with is $375. And as the money from our community kept coming in, even as Dressember reached out and expressed interest in supporting Restore, we wondered, what is the real need? What's the real gap at Restore beyond these initial 38 women? And the need for Restore is for 85 women who've lost their jobs as a result of COVID. So have no earnings and no security or assurance that she can return back to her job. And we're estimating at Restore that will be approximately $475,000 between now and the end of June. That's our current estimation. So the need is great. And we also see the community responding to meet that need. And we're grateful for Dressember stepping up and supporting during this time. And I'll just close with a story of a woman that we're working with and helping right now. It kind of reflects an example of the impact you may be able to make as you seek to support Dressember, and they help Love146 and Restore. So a woman named Kaya, she had been trafficked from a country in South America to Florida. She had been transported across 5 different states in the South over a period of 5 years. The average length of time, by the way, for a woman trafficked at Restore is 4 years, the average length of time she's trafficked. And we've worked with women now of over 80 nationalities. So this woman, Kaya, she came up through Florida, was trafficked for a number of years, and fortunately she was able to run out of the home where she had been kept for so long. She ran out of the home, a car came by, she ran into the vehicle, they took her to a hospital, and fortunately law enforcement came, figured out she had been trafficked, and they transported her by bus up to New York City. At Restore, we get referrals. We've now had referrals from 26 different states across the US, including California, including Connecticut, where Rob and the Love146 team is based here in the States. And she entered our safe home and was part of an early cohort of our economic empowerment program. She had been working in a safe job for 2 years. She had been promoted to a supervisory position, and she had 2 kids that she was able to be reunited with. But as the city of New York shut down, she lost her employment right away. And unfortunately, her manager was not able to ensure that she would be able to return to work once New York City opened up, whether the business would even exist after this time of us returning to business as usual. The weight of this was so significant. She called Stephanie, who's our manager of job development, and was tearful and said she, again, as I shared before, was considering going back onto the streets. She just had no options to help at that time. We told her about this fund. This was early on when we were starting to bring in money, and that we would assure that we could offer at least a month's rent comparable to what she had made previously. And that meant all the world to Kaya. It has for the 30 plus other women that we've helped so far. It has provided for Kaya hope. There is a light for her at the end of this. Because of additional funding that's come through, we've been able to say it's very possible we can support you not just for the first month, mid-March through mid-April, but potentially through the end of June. And this will ensure safety for both her and her 2 kids. So yeah, we thank you for being on the call this evening and learning about the challenges of survivors of trafficking in our nation and in New York City.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Amanda. And again, if you guys have questions about survivors, especially like in economic empowerment programs right now, like how losing their jobs, getting back into the workforce, things like that, Amanda is the one to ask. So again, you can put your questions into the chat box and we'll get to those after we hear from Rob, who is again the president and co-founder of Love146. So Rob, I will let you take it from here.
All right. Thank you, Marissa and Blythe from Dressember, for making this happen, and for Amanda being in this as well. We've Love146 has had a deep love for Restore NYC now, for going on for almost 7 years, I believe. We've been connected and have been really impressed with the work that you guys are doing in New York City. So thank you for being all in, and thank you everybody for showing up. You know, the reality is like right now, and this is just one of these transparent opportunities, we're all in such uncharted territory, right? We're just trying to figure this out. And yeah, it's what's, I guess, encouraging to me is that there's so many people that are in it, and so many people that are doing what they can to contribute and helping out. And so, yeah, just thank you everyone for showing up and wanting to be a part of this. Yeah, so Love146, we're about almost 18 years old now as an organization. We're working on 4 continents. We've got work in the Philippines. We're working with survivors there, specifically for children. And we're working with survivors also in the UK, and as well as here in the US. And then we also have prevention work that we're doing specifically in Madagascar, in Liberia, and prevention work here in the US. And Yeah, so our goal or our vision is very similar to Amanda's. It's the end of child trafficking. Specifically, we deal only with children, um, and yeah, we've been accused at times, or I don't know if accused is the right word of being naive or idealistic, having such a bold vision and saying that we want to see this thing end. We prefer to think of it not as idealistic or naive, but audacious. And so that's what I love about what Dressember is doing. I think Blythe, with your vision in creating Dressember was an audacious vision, and just hearing what you guys have been able to accomplish is so powerful. And yeah, so specifically, the Dressember is supporting our work right now in the Philippines. So I wanted to address that, in that we've kind of taken a double hit since the beginning of this year. This year, 2020, I don't know about you guys, but like I approach every year sort of like, wow, what's this new year going to hold in store? Never in a million years did any of us think that this is what was going to be happening. So our January started out in the Philippines with a volcano. The Taal volcano erupted, and we had to evacuate all of our children because we were within range of the volcano. And so all of our children were evacuated and sort of in quarantine away from the falling ash for a couple of weeks, actually. And so we had just finished cleaning up and spent quite a bit in cleaning up the mess of the volcano, and then this thing hit. And so our kids have been in quarantine now. Both all of our boys and our girls are on one property now. We had two properties, but we've thought it would be easier if we had everybody together in one place. And all of our staff have been locked down. They can't travel. So all of our staff are locked down with the kids. And all of that has just increased the costs. And I think what's interesting about the children that we work with, and in dealing with something like human trafficking, is that there's a common denominator, whether it's adult survivors in New York City coming from another country, or whether it's kids here right in Connecticut. We've provided direct services to over 500 children right here in the state of Connecticut that are either confirmed or suspected victims of trafficking in just a small state of Connecticut. But no matter where it is, whether it's the Philippines or in Africa or in the UK, the common denominator is vulnerability. And when I was a kid, there used to be a show on television that I used to watch with my family on Sunday nights called Wild Kingdom. And it was one of these safari shows. And I remember as a kid watching this show, one of the things that would always drive me crazy as a kid and terrify me was when you would hear sort of like the guy that was running it was a guy named Marlon Perkins, and he was this older safari guy, and he was he would say, hey, look out on the fields there, you'll see this herd of antelope or some kind of animals out in the field grazing. And you're looking and they're all beautiful, they're grazing and everything. He says, but look closer in the tall grass surrounding the field. And the camera would zoom in and you'd see a lion in the grass creeping slowly through the grass to the edge of the field where all the antelope are grazing. And I remember as a kid just wanting to yell through my TV screen to the antelope, run, there's a lion in the grass, he's about to attack and stuff. And I remember that feeling of being so frustrated and scared as a kid. And sure enough, I heard the lion would burst out of the tall grass and go after the herd. And the interesting thing was, and I remember this to this day, is the lion would never go after the strongest or the fastest in the herd. The lion, as a predator, was able to spot and identify the most vulnerable. It was able to understand vulnerability and go after it. So it would go after the youngest, it would go after the sick or the infirmed or the oldest, those that could not keep up. And it's so crazy that in dealing with an issue like human trafficking, we're talking about that same sort of predatory aspect of people who look for vulnerability and prey on that vulnerability. And what's happened through this whole COVID experience is the typical vulnerabilities that we see in the children that we work with have now been amplified. And the trauma that kids have been through, that have been trafficked and exploited, that trauma has now been amplified with additional trauma. I mean, think about the trauma that we're all sort of experiencing on different levels right now of dealing with what we've got to deal with. So many of us, I mean, in society right now are in survival mode, right? We're hunkered down. We're trying to figure out how to get enough toilet paper for our families, right? There's this panic thing, this trauma thing. And then you put that onto people who have known and experienced trauma beyond some of my worst imaginations, and it creates an insane vulnerability. So the kids that we're working with, their vulnerability, especially now with not being in eyesight, specifically here in the States, of people that would typically be able to identify some of the warning signs of this kid's in trouble, or this kid looks like they might be exploited or being taken advantage of, or whatever. Teachers or doctors or people that they normally have interactions with, they're no longer seeing these children. These children are no longer being seen by those people, and they're spending a ton of time online. And as we know, the online sexual exploitation of children is just exploding. I mean, the FBI just a couple of weeks ago came out with a statement, a warning statement saying, hey, this is, we're watching child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation increasing dramatically right now because of the situations that I just shared. So we're having to scramble and try to figure out how to meet those needs. So our social workers here in the U.S. are having, Zoom conversations with their kids. They're connecting through text messaging and through video calls and phone calls and all of that, and trying to track. And we're doing some of the similar things that Amanda shared in providing some of the basic needs. Families that may not be able to pay their rent, and thus increasing the vulnerability and finding ways to be helpful in that regard. And so, yeah, so the vulnerability has increased, and because of that vulnerability, there are those that would also spend a lot of time online taking advantage of that vulnerability and seeking for ways to exploit it. So it's new territory. I'm so grateful that we have a staff that is incredibly flexible and have a steely determination, is how I describe it. I'm blown away by our frontline workers that are in the trenches working with our kids day in and day out, and figuring out how to be creative and ways to connect and all of that, so kids are not feeling alone or isolated. It's been a tremendous thing to see. And on top of that, I think the other thing that's been mind-boggling is the generosity of people. I mean, whether it's you guys at Dressember or individuals who take time on a Thursday night to Zoom, together to find out, hey, what can we do? Or we want to know more about this, that have moved out of just self-survival into like, hey man, I want to be helpful. I want to find a way that I can contribute, I think is an amazing thing. And before I turn it back to Blythe and Marissa, I wanted to share a couple things. One of the things that's been mind-blowing to me is the reports that I'm getting specifically from the Philippines, and I'm getting videos every day and phone calls every day from our staff there with just pictures and videos of the kids just having a blast in lockdown. I mean, it's such an interesting thing. Years ago, I had brought a supporter with me to observe our work there in the Philippines. And after spending a day playing with these kids and hanging out with these kids, this person looks at me and she says, I'm really confused. This is not what I was expecting to see. She said, man, I look around and these kids are just like real children. And I was just like, yeah, that's because they are real children. And I love that the children that we work with are aggressively taking their lives and their childhoods back and finding ways to do that. I'm seeing pictures of our kids, our older kids, helping with homeschooling our younger kids and encouraging them. They're having swim parties. They're learning how to play musical instruments and having little mini concerts and all that. In the midst of despair, there's this sense of defiant hope in the mix of all of it. And even something like this, to me, is one of those things that creates hope, right? That there's a sense of defiant hope saying, hey man, we're in, we want to be a part of this. And real quick, I wanted to share one of the things that our director of survivor care in the Philippines, she was doing some therapeutic sessions with the kids, asking them how they're dealing with fear and what that looks like in their own lives, and then sort of turned it around and said, hey, you know, there's a lot of people in the world right now that are really afraid, for some of the same reasons that you guys are afraid. If you were to give grown-ups a piece of advice on how to deal with their own fear, what would you say? And here's a couple of the quotes from some of the kids that maybe will encourage you guys even tonight. This one boy, a 13-year-old, he said, "What the world experiences today will soon end. It will turn into light, and the fear that the people feel will soon be gone." Another boy said, "You need to fight. Strengthen your body's resistance and be brave. Do not panic and avoid crowds." Here's another, a girl, 13-year-old girl, "Stay strong. Believe in the scientists, doctors, and above all, God." And then a 14-year-old said, "Do not lose hope." And I just really, really love that. And that's coming from kids encouraging us grown-ups in the midst of something that's traumatic and something that creates a lot of fear. And I love what the author Anne Lamott said when she said, hope begins in the dark. You know, the stubborn hope that if you just show up and try to do the right thing, that the dawn will come. You wait, you watch, you work, you never give up. And so that's what this whole thing is about. And so even in a crisis like that we're in, I love when I see people like you guys, like Amanda, and what Restore NYC is doing, what Blythe and Marissa is doing through Dressember, and what all of you are doing in being involved. There's this sense of like perseverance and not giving up that's really encouraging during this time. And you're seeing these kinds of stories starting to really eclipse some of the other stories, which is really beautiful.
Thank you so much, Rob. I love what you said about this just being like such an encouraging thing at the same time. And it's so great to see like everyone collaborating, and especially as like anti-trafficking organizations, like we want to do what we can to support your guys' work. And I think we're all just absorbing all of this information and then trying to present it to our communities about how to engage, how to get involved. So I'm going to talk just for a couple minutes about ways you can get involved with Dressember right now, and then we will open it up to Q&A. So again, pop those in the chat if you have questions for anyone, for Dressember, for Love146, or for Restore, and we will answer them as best as we can. So we're doing a lot at Dressember right now. We have a few different things going on. So as most of you know, we wear dresses and ties for the month of December, and as a style challenge, we decided to implement Dressember Fancy Fridays on Fridays while we're doing the COVID campaign. So even though you're working from home, probably not seeing anyone, you can use the hashtag Dressember Fancy Friday to talk about the campaign, talk about your involvement, and just bring awareness to how trafficking is actually linked to COVID. Also on Fridays, we are doing social hours every Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time. And we've been doing them for the past couple weeks just to kind of have like conversations, provide support for each other, talk about how COVID is impacting trafficking. We're going to start doing some other really exciting topics. We've had a lot of interest about how, Dressember is so like fashion influenced, and we talk about ethical fashion and the link to like forced labor and trafficking in the garment industry a lot. So we want to shed light on also how COVID is affecting garment workers and how it's affecting small ethical brands as well. So we'll be talking about that next Friday in our social hour with a couple of our brand partners. This Friday, we're going to be focusing on how to fundraise during COVID. As we all know, it's a very difficult time to ask your community to donate or to take action. So we're going to be providing some tips on that this Friday. Also, as Blythe mentioned, this is around the time where we normally host our spring 5K. And we've decided to move that to a virtual 5K, but we're all going to be running it on the same day, which is May 2nd, Saturday, May 2nd. So you can run that solo wherever you are. And yeah, hope that you'll participate in that. So those are some fun things that we're doing. Let's see, there are some questions coming in. So I'm going to start getting to those. Yeah, so all fundraising from like early March until April 30th are going to the COVID fund. Let's see, there is a question here. Rob, I know you touched on this a little bit, and Amanda, feel free to jump in as well, or Blythe, if anyone has thoughts on this, but someone asked, what tips could you share for parents right now about how to talk to their kids about internet safety during this time?
Sure, I'll jump in on that. If you, we have some really good resources on our website, um, uh, internet safety guides for both parents and caregivers, as well as one for kids. There's two separate things because it relates differently. In fact, kids helped us make the one for kids, so it's not like a bunch of adults created saying, "Hey, this is how you stay safe, kids." It's actually something that they're interested in and can engage with. So if you go to our website under resources, you can find those. Also, if we have a PSA that we created for this whole COVID time that has been getting some pretty decent traction, that also connects people to, hey, this is how you can stay safe online. And so I believe if you go to love146.org/stay safe, there's all kinds of tips there, resources, and links to additional resources and tips that you can access.
Great. Yeah, I saw Sarah just linked those. So Sarah is also from Love146. We're trying to share as many resources we can too on our blog about all kinds of things to do during quarantine. Also, talking to your kids is one of them. It hasn't been published yet, but it will be in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. We also have a couple of like ways to like blog posts around how to spend your time during quarantine. So we'll link that here. And a few like documentaries you can watch, a few books you can read, just different things to spend your time mindfully during this time. Let's see. So I see a question about is fundraising from Dressember Canada going toward these organizations? So we don't have our Canada 2020 campaign open, so you will be fundraising on the Dressember World site, Dressember World site. Okay, here's a question probably for both Rob and Amanda. How are victims and survivors being impacted more than other populations?
Yeah, I'll speak to that here in New York City. Many of you likely have heard that the pandemic, that COVID is impacting disproportionately women and girls of color. The impact on Black and the Latina population here in New York City is significant. Also, the immigrant population, there's real barriers to access for healthcare and fears around deportation and what might happen to immigrant communities and their children and families. We know that survivors of trafficking, with the vulnerabilities that we've talked about, with the disparity of wealth, drives further challenges to access care, relief services. And so, here in New York, I had mentioned 11,000 people have died to date. I think it's around 130 cases have been reported so far. At Restore, about 1 in 20 clients have had symptoms of COVID. Many have confirmed COVID tests, and we've had two clients who've been hospitalized. We do think the vulnerabilities that we described do contribute to greater risks with the pandemic. For us, again, it comes back to both this public health crisis as it intersects with the economic crisis. And, we've been talking with partners in the field, those who work on more the demand end, and then also those who are on the law enforcement side, our partners who are on the recovery aftercare portion of the work, these parties that Dressember is supporting within these different kind of camps of the anti-trafficking field. And there's a lot of talk right now that demand has drastically dropped for commercial sex in the United States. For our partners who are scrubbing online, looking at chatter on traditional sites where sex is being sold, are seeing very few exchanges, very few reviews, very few advertisements compared to a typical month on these sites. We do have questions in light of what appears to be a fall in demand of how our traffickers, who we know to be sophisticated business people who exploit others for financial gain, how are they shifting their business model right now when it comes to the exploitation of individuals. And, some of that we'll need to learn more about over time. Rob had mentioned, certainly there's more taking place online. We're hearing about like home deliveries. We're hearing about more high risk scenarios where traffickers are transporting individuals to meet one-on-one with buyers. And there we know there's much greater risk for exposure to COVID and other health challenges. But yeah, I think we're in the early period right now of learning the impact of this pandemic and economic crisis on trafficking as a business model, both here in the States and around the world. And we expect, as a nonprofit agency doing this work in New York City, that we are going to have to drastically shift our strategy in how we find victims and how we provide services for at least the next 18 months. I think the landscape's going to look different. We need to adapt with the changing market.
Thanks, Amanda. Just kind of a question off of that. I thought it was really interesting, and you touched on it a little bit, how Restore mentioned, I think it was last week, that really this is an opportunity to look at economic empowerment programs, especially from your perspective. Like, what is the weight of like an economic crisis, but then the safety of the survivors that you work with and placing them in jobs? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yes. And last week we had talked to Marissa about our cooperative. And, we are very active right now, our team, in looking for business opportunities, as many of our partners have closed their doors. There are still some sectors that are thriving and are in need of employees. And one of the contracts that was made available to the cooperative was for a local hospital, well-known hospital, who needed cleaning staff that wanted to secure a contract with the cooperative. And our board on the cooperative is composed of survivors, and they voted not to take the contract because of the health and safety challenges that presented. We've had a few other positions in addition to this one where, like solid position, great pay and opportunity, but many survivors, at least at present, are opting into safety, understandably, for themselves and their families to reside at home and wait this out until our order lifts, which I believe as of today, we're sheltering in place here, you too, Rob, in Connecticut through May 15th. And so when it comes to economic empowerment, we know at least for another month, the majority of survivors, even if there was an opportunity for employment, are prioritizing physical health and safety over financial security at this time.
That's great. Thank you. And I think it just adds to the need for support from organizations like Restore that are making that possible for them not to have to turn to employment that might put them in danger. Rob, is there anything you wanted to add to what Amanda said?
No, I think there's an irony in that we just recently hired somebody at Love146 to head up our employment and education program that we were just about to launch. And so, yeah, this makes that a bit more challenging for sure.
Yeah, and we're starting to kind of imagine what this will look like for the new economy, right? And for businesses opening up. For the 85 women that I talked about, yeah, we expect only 10 at most by the end of May may be able to be employed. And we're adding another 20, maybe 25 each month, potentially. But, none of us know right now where businesses will be or, how the job market will take shape. Here in New York City, we may be one of the latter communities to open back up again. Again, our time horizon at Restore right now is 18 months. We're entering a 3-phase model of relief, recovery, and rebuilding. And we're certainly in that relief mode right now. Yeah, we're in crisis response. At Restore, we've often talked about being an organization that focuses on long-term sustainability and impact for the survivors that we work with. And right now it's been an incredible challenge as the majority of survivors we work with are in crisis mode. I mean, we have not seen this many people in crisis since we started as a nonprofit. At any given time, maybe 10% of clients that we are working with are in true crisis and in need of immediate assistance. Right now at Restore, it looks closer to 80-90% of the 200 women that we're working with.
Okay, wow, thank you for sharing that. So last question we'll answer, and I feel like it's a really good one to end on, and I'll kind of open this up to my team and Rob and Amanda, if you want to add into. So the question is, how can I contribute help during this time? At Dressember, we're so big on awareness, like that's kind of the first step. So I think even if you can't take action, you're not in a place to give or to advocate, you can always share articles and read about what's going on, the effects on trafficking, and there's so much power in sharing that. I spoke about a few specific ways to get involved with Dressember over the next few weeks when we're hosting the COVID campaign. Blythe and Tori, did you want to add anything Dressember related? And then we'll let Amanda and Rob jump in.
Yeah, I think giving is really important right now. It doesn't matter how little it feels like you're giving, but if you're able to give even $5, that really makes a difference. We've seen year after year through Dressember the power of small gifts and the power of our collective impact. You might feel like only one person who cannot possibly help all the people in crisis around the world. But you can help someone. And when we come together, we can help a lot of someones, and that matters. And if you are not able to give, that's okay. It's a great time to advocate both for mental health. That's, part of the reason the 5K, it's great to get outside and move. If you are in a place where you can do that. We don't really advise doing that in New York City per se, but most other places you can still get outside and run around without bumping into anyone. And we're going to be talking tomorrow, like Marissa said, about how to fundraise during a time when a lot of people are in crisis, and how to make people aware of these other crises that are happening in a way that's also empathetic towards the crises all around us all the time. So I just encourage you guys, if you're kind of feeling that tension of like, oh my gosh, like so many people I know are filing for unemployment, and how could I possibly ask for money right now, or escalate the anxiety that people are already feeling by bringing this onto their awareness. We're going to be talking about some of that tomorrow. So hope you'll join us.
Yeah, and I'll just add, again, how grateful we are for the Dressember community for your support to Love146 and Restore. At Restore, we have never in our history, to my knowledge, had a campaign where every single dollar goes directly to the hands of survivors. And we know how essential at this time that is. And every dollar that's given to Dressember and the portion that comes to Restore will go to survivors of trafficking and their families. And that's just it's a tremendous help at this time. We've been talking to our supporters about, our motto at Restore is to make freedom real. And we're in a moment where we're trying to keep freedom real. And your gift will ensure that women are not re-trafficked again, that amidst the vulnerabilities and great challenges that are being faced, that someone might not return to prostitution, but instead have what we hope and are prayerful for, a life of hope and freedom. So thank you for your great support of Dressember and the work happening across the U.S.
It's great. And I'll just add the amen and amen to all of that. And I think we tell people all the time at Love146, we say, hey, people say, what can I do? Sometimes it's preceded with, besides give money, what can I do? And obviously the funds are absolutely crucial. I'm sure, like Amanda, that, there's been some sleepless nights in the last month or so, just knowing what's at stake here and knowing the environment that we're in right now. And as a charity, there's this real feeling of like walking on eggshells right now, being so careful and being sensitive to where everybody is at. And so that's been challenging, but I think just doing what you love to do and finding a way to connect it, when we have people that want to do hey, I want to do the Liam Neeson thing and break down a brothel door. It's like, no, actually, would be more helpful is maybe mentoring young men, that don't have a mentor in their life or whatever. Doing practical things, educating yourself, learning as much as you possibly can, and then educating others. And again, there's a stack of resources that we have, the PSAs, the resources that we have on staying safe online, absolutely crucial, especially right now. So access all of that. It's all there to be able to connect to. So, and again, thank you, Dressember. Thank you, all of you that are a part of this thing. Gives me so much hope, and it's so encouraging.
Great way to end, right on the dot, Rob, 5 o'clock on the dot. I love that. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really hope that this was helpful. Tori linked in the link for the Zoom call where you can sign up to our social hour tomorrow, where we're going to be talking all about fundraising during COVID. Let us know if you have any additional thoughts, questions. Rob and Amanda, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you, everyone.